Welcome back to another episode of The Fellas. Today we're going to talk about the Canadian Grand Prix. However, before we get in, we'd like you to like, share, and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and at the same time, you can find us on all your streaming platforms. Simon, what was your take on this weekend?
Man, the weekend was great. It was a good race. I think we saw some entertainment finally. I think a lot of the unpredictability of the weather and sprint racing and everything was awesome. I was at the edge of my seat this afternoon watching the race. I'm sure we got some great topics for us to talk about today, but yeah, it was a good race. What were your overall thoughts?
I think it was, an entertaining weekend, right? To see what the cars with the adjusted energy deployment, right? And seeing how they behave on track was pretty good. And, the hype that was around Kimi for, being the youngest and, winning, all those races to see what would happen, how George was taking that and to see, what happened throughout the weekend. So, we could jump into Mercedes dominance, battle, and failure. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think the tagline is perfect, right? They were dominant through the sprint race. They were dominant through qualifying for both sprint race and the race. They had pole both times. George Russell had pole in each, pulling out some crazy, qualifying times to get pole, especially on his last run for the race. And then, during the race, they had some battles going on, which was very, very entertaining. It must have lasted 20 laps or more. And then epic failure that happened to George. So overall, Mercedes is looking strong, right? Right now they're the team to beat. So much so that they're battling each other on the racetrack. And for all the F1 lovers out there and fans, I think that is something that we want to see. We don't really care who it is, but we just want to see some, in the top 8, top 10 competitors out there. We want to see some battling. We don't want the race to be predictable. And with Mercedes right now, yes, they are predictable as far as being dominant, but you're not sure who's actually going to win the race. So what did you think?
I think so. I think, George, it got under George's skin, which is understandable, right? Because all the hype that Kimi was getting, it would get under a driver's skin. And I think George came out with a point to prove this weekend that he is the elder statesman and, the young buck needs to respect his position on the team, right? Because he's worked very hard to be that elder statesman or the point guy on the team. And he was doing it pretty well. Right. And, Kimi is doing this thing and saying, well, I want it and I'm going to go for it. And it kind of reminded me back in the days of, Alonso and Hamilton? And, when Hamilton was a young, driver coming aboard and, challenging the established driver. So it gave me some, reminiscence of that activity. And then when we came to I thought everything was going well until we came to the race. Right. And we started out and, pretty well. Kimi was making some passes, attacking George and, passing in areas that really should, right before the wall of champions, right there in that chicane where, people were saying, well, that's not the optimum place to pass. And they even had one time they came through there and he was on the outside and they touched tires. No, he was on the inside. George was on the outside and he touched tires. Right. And the team told him to give it back. So he was very aggressive on that. And that was going back and forth for quite some time for, a numerous amount of laps on there until, equipment failure, right? And that's George showed his true emotion at that time that, it was a devastating blow to him because, he had a build-up for the whole weekend where he was showing, Kimi that he had his measure. And then, all of a sudden, when he needed the equipment to come and, continue to support him, it gave way. So, I felt for George on that go around, right? But then we had the McClaren people, right? With their little foibles, right? Because we had Oscar coming on right? Because of the weather, people were picking which type of tire they wanted to be on. And Oscar came on and said, hey, after they're rolling, saying, I think we may have made the wrong choice. Move to another tire to the slicks because the rain is going to stop, and we're going to still go. So Oscar put it through. They had Imbligh's car that went bad on track, so they had to go around again, and the team didn't change, right? And it kind of proved the point that they should have listened to their driver on that goal. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, before I get to McClaren, I still had a few things I wanted to say about Mercedes, because I think there's some immaturity that's happening with Kimi, with the rivalry with George, right? I think he still has to understand that they're both in a situation that they've earned, right? And they've fought a long time to get to Formula One. It is not easy to get to Formula One, right? It's not only there's a lot of money, there's a lot of sacrifice time-wise. And so they've both earned their right to get there. And they both should be fighting for number one position, right? So Kimi can't get upset when his teammate doesn't give way to him, right? And he's going to have to realize that, Russell's earned his right to not give way, right? You're going to have to pass him legitimately, just like Lewis and Max did both to each other. And we'll talk about that later. But they legitimately passed each other, and there's no kerfuffle there, no animosity. I mean, there was several years ago, but they're both earned the right to be in number one spot. So that's why 5-6 years ago they were going after it. And Kimi's going to have to realize he can't get on the radio and just start getting mad all the time, right? So to me, that was a failure on Mercedes' side, where Toto had to come on and say, hey, relax. We don't air our dirty laundry out on the radio for everyone to hear, because before they pit us against each other. So I like the battle. I think it's good for the fans. I think Kimi's going to have some maturing to do, because he's only 19, just turned 19. And he's in the lead. He's in the lead by 43 points. So there's no reason for him to get so excited. It's not the last race. It's not the last race of the season, right? McClaren, yeah, you're right. Bad decision to put on those intermediates. No one else I shouldn't say no one else. The majority of the teams didn't have intermediates on. All of them had the red tires on, the soft tires. And that was a bad decision. I think they were just hoping to be different and really get ahead of Mercedes because of the rain, but the rain never came. So it really put them in that disadvantage. Having them be at that disadvantage now put them at they had to change the tires really fast. So, now they're in the middle of the pack, and that's where accidents happen. So it was just one thing after another domino effect, that they didn't really get any points at all. Piastri came in 11th, if I'm not mistaken. So they didn't earn any points. Ferrari was able to gain, and Mercedes were able to gain on them. So that one major decision ruined their entire race, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree, because even though they were trying to recover from that problem, from the situation that they did before, there's still that they had issues with that popped up that took one of them out. So I think they have to go back and regroup to see what's where their failure points are, right? And they didn't strike me as a team last year that was so adamant on whatever procedure they picked on before that they wouldn't be able to pivot, right? So it leads me to ask, is it because Oscar asked the question why, they didn't want to pivot and they were so adamant, to stay where they were? Or, because would it be different if it was Lando saying, hey, we need to roll? Is there still, I'm not sure, but I'm throwing out there, is there still favoritism going on, right? Even this early in the game, right? So, that's something from, I guess people can weigh in and see what they want to do about that. But my favorite part of the weekend, though, was the performance of the Ferrari team. What do you think about that?
Ferrari. I think, Lewis really showed that he still has it, if he has a good enough car. I still think they have some power issues, and he was complaining about that during the race. But yeah, Lewis did have a good weekend. I mean, he was strong from the sprint race. He was really, qualifying well and putting up some good numbers. What frustrates me though in both of the qualifying, whether it was the sprint or the race, is that as the track evolves, right, and you're getting down to that last qualifying of Q3, the track evolves, and he could have really fought for second or pole, I thought, right, or even third. But on both qualifying instances, he never finished his last run on Q3 properly, right? So he never got an opportunity to take advantage of the evolution of the track, right? So he was setting really good qualifying times with everyone else, and then when everybody else was, taking the advantage of the evolution of the track, he didn't twice. So that worries me a little bit, that he's not fully taking advantage of that, because I think he could have been second on pole, or even third, based on how he was driving, right? But he never took advantage of the evolution of the track. So yes, he had a great weekend. Charles kind of had a so-so weekend. I don't know what's going on with his car. I don't know why he is so, this is the first weekend I saw in a year and a half that Lewis outshined Charles. Okay. So that's a whole nother conversation I think we need to have, is like, what happened to Charles and why he's so frustrated on the radio. But yeah, Ferrari had a good stint. A little luck there with George going out. But yeah, it was great to see Lewis in the podium. He was going to be on the podium anyway, I thought. Just because of the tire choices that I saw that Piastri and Lando took, I just figured that Lewis was going to be in third place based on that faux pas. But he came in second, so it was good for him.
True. I was happy for Lewis, right? To start out with that, with his performance, because he was, even the commentators, Julian Palmer was commenting, and even Juan Pablo commenting that, it's reminiscence of the old Lewis, whatever, from past, or, things of that nature, right? And I think for whatever reason, it seemed like Lewis got the setup that he needed, because it was also a big thing that, I don't know if you heard, that Lewis said, to heck with the going to the simulator, right? So it makes me now question, what's up with Ferrari? Why he's not willing to go to Lewis to the simulator anymore, right? Why is he foregoing that, and then seems to have a good weekend from that, right? So it makes me wonder what's going on there. Are they trying to make him drive in a different way that he's not accustomed to or not comfortable with, right? So those are some of the questions that popped up in my head when that came out, that he sidestepped the simulation practice and just went out and drive, right? And we saw Lewis that's still there, that he's a driver and that he's competitive, and he was wringing the car's neck, right? The back of the car was champion. He was at the wall of champions. He almost touched the wall a couple of times, and he did touch it towards the end of the sprint. So that's what I feel, when he hit the rear tire, he kind of fell off a little bit, and I think that's what gave Charles the ability to come around it, right? So, but today in the race, he was on it, right? He was pushing, and I admit I got nervous when Verstappen caught him and passed him, with Max's lunge, and then I was watching the delta between him and Verstappen, and I'm like, man, are you going to be able to make that up, right? And at the same time, I'm watching what Charles doing to see how close is Charles to Lewis, to see if it's going to be another, usual where Lewis goes up front, and by the end, Charles comes around and goes. And, it worked out with this couple of virtual safety cars, because I haven't gotten nervous with the virtual safety cars, right? Because now the tire falls out of temperature range, and then, they're going to have to bring it back into range to go forward again, right? So it made me nervous at that point. And he held it off pretty well, because towards the end, and I saw, I was watching his delta, and he started closing on Max, and I was like, okay, let's do this, right? And, he started pushing some more. So that's, that was a good thing for me, right? To see that happen, to see that, he is a racer. If you give him what he needs, if you figure out what he needs, he's going to do it, right? And he
Yeah,
pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed hard, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, and he definitely pushed against Verstappen, right? He made
Yes,
that battle was good to see, and it was clean.
yes,
I thought maybe we might have an issue, because Verstappen don't like anybody passing him, especially Lewis. But it
right.
wasn't. They both gave each other room and space and raced fairly. And man, I wish that was something that we saw 6, 7 years ago, but we didn't. But because I really think that Verstappen or Lewis was passing the torch to Verstappen to a certain degree. And I know you kind of have to hate your rival a little bit to in
Mm,
order to do that.
right.
But today you could see that they are really good drivers, right?
Yes.
Really
Yeah.
good drivers. The cars are almost equal. I think Verstappen, if they could figure out a way to get the tire temperature back up, I think it would have been harder for Lewis to pass him. Which brings
Yeah.
up a good point. What is Ferrari doing that it would allow them to have better tire temperature than Red Bull at this point, right? I mean, what setup do they have that is getting them to? They were moving. Lewis was moving anyway. I don't know about
Well,
Charles.
but I
Charles
don't think that's not to interrupt you, but I don't think the Ferrari setup was that great because when I watched it, most times coming out the corner, the car wasn't, it was oversteering somewhat, right? They weren't locked, if the tires weren't hooking up and pulling them out, right? I know I was watching because it was even throughout the whole weekend. They were talking about, Lewis was, the car sliding it, but he, was in control of it, trying to, push it forward. So I still think I think there's still an issue with the setup with the Ferrari that it's still not optimum from what I saw this weekend. You
But
know,
I saw, when I look back,
uh huh.
especially at what's the last turn before you get to the straight, to the finish line, and
Yeah,
everybody's
yeah.
kind of taking that turn.
The
The
wall of
wa-
champions. Yeah.
yeah, I saw Verstappen, his back, getting loose a little bit. I think Lewis likes that for that track.
Mm,
And I think that's why he was giving some good numbers. And that's another thing that you brought up about not using the simulator. And he said he wanted to feel the car out now. I think he's just kind of going back to old school and saying, you know what?
yeah.
We're getting so technical with this car that I'm losing my edge that I had when I first started in Formula One. So I'm going to go back to my butt dial and drive the car, right? Because
Yeah.
that's his
Yeah.
edge. That's always been his edge,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yep.
So you're not going to ask that from Kimmy. Kimmy's 19. He's going to take what you give him from a technical standpoint,
Right.
right? But Lewis is, he's drove what 4 or 5 generations of different cars now.
Yeah. But it comes back to what I said before, right? That
Mm-hmm.
the drivers, the engineers are getting so focused on data that they're leaving out the equation. It's not a robot driving the car, it's a human, right? So even when the data says something, you still got to check back with the human to see where they are with what the data is saying, right? What the feedback that data is going to cause them in the race, where is that going to put them? To say, because I think as engineers, with the human factor, it's not that he's a rookie, so you can push him around. He's a driver that's been there for years, right? So what is that I would defer to the driver and say, hey, okay, we'll overlook, see how the car goes without us doing this point, this data point, right? And see how you perform. Because ultimately, you have to provide confidence in the driver has to be confident in the car for them to perform their optimal.
Yeah, but it depends on the driver. The driver has to be at a certain age to understand that, right? You're not going to ask that of Kimmy. Kimmy's 19, so he's been surrounded by technology. He's been surrounded by data, so he wants the data, right? But you're not going to ask that from Alonso or Lewis, because Lewis and Alonso know the days of where there was no data, so they had to use their butt, right? So
Yeah.
as the generations, get younger, the information that's coming to them is going to be different than the information that Lewis was getting when he was 19, right? So that's something that you kind of have to take into consideration as well. You're not going to ask. I wouldn't ask Kimmy, tell me what the data is telling you, and telling me, and telling you rather, so I can adjust it. No, Kimmy, he's familiar with that.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying, right? But I think that Kimi, to get to that level of racing, you have to have some knowledge of the feedback you get in the car and corresponds to the data, right? Yes, the team would be more reluctant possibly to move towards because Kimi is just a rookie, as opposed to you have a seasoned veteran that's been there to say, hey, no, this is not what I want from the car. So yeah, in a way, all right, I'll go with you. I'll go with you on that because it's still, it still comes back. The team. In the shoes of the team, I'd more listen to an 8-time world champion than I would to a rookie that's pulling up, right? To say,
but I'm not. I think where we're disconnected is like Lewis knows the days of no data. Kimi doesn't. So Lewis can always say, hey, this is how the car feels based on that data. That's great, but the car is telling me this, right? You're not going to be able to get that feedback from Kimi because Kimi wasn't around when there was no data. Kimi is used to data.
So you see what I'm getting dependent on getting the feedback from the data?
Right. It's just two different generations, right? So, I would want to be able to translate that data back to Lewis or Alonso based on their experiences and say, yes, this is what the data is telling me. But what are you telling me based on your 20-something years of racing?
Right.
I'm not going to ask that of Kimi because Kimi is used to to technology that I'm used to.
So that's the skill that the feedback from it would be. He's more dependent on the data. That's what you're trying to say.
Right.
To dictate how he needs to drive, as opposed to him finding what his driving style is independent of the data. Interesting. Never thought about that one, but that's something I think about because that is something to think about. But again, I think getting back there, I think that he did well this weekend. His mom was there. Everybody was saying maybe his mom is his lucky charm, that is doing. But he reminded me this time.
He's Irish. He's Irish. I'm just kidding.
Yes, lucky charm. Yeah. But she was so she was there, and I was happy because he broke that streak now that have a non-winning driver that's drive for Ferrari. So he's podium.
Non-winning or non-podium?
Non-podium. Well,
it's a second podium.
Yeah,
it's a second podium.
I don't really count. I don't call. All right.
China.
I don't really do the sprint race, right?
It wasn't the sprint race. He came in.
That he won. He
came in third. He came in third in China.
You sure about that?
This year, absolutely.
No, last year, not this year.
He didn't win a race last year. He didn't get on the podium.
That's what I'm saying. So he was a non-winning. He was not. I was referring to that. He was a non-winning driver. He got the title last year, right? That's for the non-winning. So I was glad to see him on the podium again. So that he's showing that we'll see if he has the measure of Charles, right? Because we'll see if the team gets behind him to push forward and to help him be successful, right? So, I was happy for that. So what do you think about Red Bull? Because I'll say this on my end, right? Throughout the whole weekend, Max was complaining about the car. And the car is, not there, it's not this, it's not that. And all of a sudden, come race day, the car is that much better, right? And it seems to me that it seems to be a pattern that, if they would complain about the car during the whole weekend, and then race day, the car would outperform what the complaints were before. Is he throwing what's the saying? Throwing a Mickey, trying to, get people off guard because he came. I was surprised where that he came all the way up and he was moved through Lewis without a problem on the go. So what do you think about Red Bull? Are they being forthright with it? Yes, Isaac Ajar had some issues, but still, I'm not sure about if they're being truthful in the beginning part of the weekend that the car is a handful. It's not there.
I'll call it Red Bull's podium and then penalties, right? So basically, I think, like Ferrari, I think Red Bull took advantage of the race conditions, right? And
Mm,
we know Verstappen is really good at driving the rain, just like Lewis is. But also, Hajar was driving the heck out of that Red Bull as well. I mean, so I think Red Bull is slowly but surely getting up to snuff with McLaren and Ferrari. I think there's going to be a three or four car manufacturing race come midsummer and end of the season.
mm.
And I think it's going to come down reliability. I'm not surprised to see some reliability issues with this first season of this generation of car. So I was expecting more.
Hmm.
But I think whoever can withstand the reliability is going to gain the most manufacturer points. But Red Bull and Verstappen looks really strong. I know they still have some issues, and I think that's what Max is talking about. He understands where his car from last generation was perfect, to where
Hmm.
he was beating everybody by 30 seconds. He doesn't have that
Yeah.
anymore,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So he's complaining about that, or at least speaking his mind when it comes to those issues. But he's still a great driver, um, and I'm seeing now that Hajar is his is the better second place person for Red Bull. I mean, he's actually driving that car. He would have been in fifth place today if he didn't have all those penalties that he had to take. He had 30 seconds worth of penalties.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Expensive
dude, what are you
time.
doing? But he still came in. He still came in fifth, right?
Yeah.
Or sixth, one of the two.
Yeah.
Um,
He still
and
was in the
came in
top 10.
fifth. So
Yeah.
he's the perfect partner for Verstappen. I think Red Bull is going to come on strong mid, just like they did last year. And it's going to be dicey. I mean, just looking at the points and the standings, no one's really dominating now, except for
That's a
Kimi. And Kimi, yeah,
Mercedes.
with upgrades, Lewis talked about upgrades coming in the next couple of weeks. So I'm dying to see what they're going to do there, because I think they have a good foundation.
Hmm.
Mercedes has a really good foundation, and let's just see what they can do. I think I'm anxious to see what Red Bull is going to do at Monaco, him and Hajar. So we'll see. But the penalties killed Hajar. Woo.
Yeah. 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 It did. It did. He had to sit there for a while to do stuff. But but I just find it interesting though that the way it sounds, and maybe it's just me, from the complaints about the car during the lead up to the race, it just makes the car seem like it's like junk, and then you turn around and you kind of get this performance where he's in the top five, he's competitive, he's doing stuff. Yes, he's not running away with the race, and and nobody right now has a full measure of Mercedes, but he's there, right? Everybody else, it's the race except the only people that have pushed forward was the McLaren crew, pushed forward into up on Mercedes, but everybody else is looking for I'm finding amongst himself in the top five. So I just find it interesting that it might be a pattern that he's establishing where yes, his car is not well, this is that, but yeah, when it comes to the race, the car is performing more than one would believe if you listen to the complaints. And yeah, maybe he wants. Yes, I think every driver wants to be the one that can pull away from the team and not have a problem, right? I think that's the thing, that's the race, but it's that's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to be there, right? And I'll still say yes. He's a good driver. He has driving ability, and he showed it with that. Because that dive bomb he threw on Lewis there into that turn, it was kind of reminiscent of how what happened at the other FIA orchestrated end of the race years ago. So he just let him go, and but he worked his way back on that. So saying that, if there's nothing else, then what about for the upcoming Monaco Grand Prix? What predictions do you think you'll have?
This is going to be interesting. We both know that Monaco is one of those tracks where it's very hard to overtake, and
Mhm.
that's in previous generational cars, previous setups. But this is a new car. We don't have the drag issue or the dirty air issue that we used to have with some of the older generational cars. The power units are different and how they introduce power. So I'm kind of curious to see if it's going to be the same old thing that's been happening for the last 20 years, or there's going to be opportunities to pass. I think qualifying is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be in the same order. I think it's going to be Mercedes, and it's going to be between McLaren and Ferrari on who's going to be behind Mercedes. And I think that's how the race starts, is how the race is going to finish, unless the new chassis power unit changes and regulations makes it out to be a little different. I'm curious. I don't have my hopes up. I'm still thinking it's going to be one of those boring races that I should be a spectator at live. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So yes, predictions. I was long-winded. Russell, Norris, Kimi. I think I'm going that way.
Interesting. Okay, Russell, Norris, and Kimi. Well, I agree with you on what you commented on, right? That for me, Monaco is a parade lap thing. So it depends on where you qualify. Kind of dictates where you're going to be finishing, right? Because the streets are narrow, right? So there's not that much room for overtaking, right? And so I think it's gonna be interesting with the new platform, because they set it up for it to go passing and stuff like that. So it'd be to see how they implement that in that track. It'll be interesting to see, because it's it's there as a marquee from the years past, moving forward and all that stuff. But I still think there's nothing really on track activity per se. You're going to see more, parading around. So that being said, I think it's going to be Russell. I think Piastri, and I want to say if he doesn't, Kimi, if they don't hit the barrier,
yeah, and I think that's where I'm going to. I think you and I are on the same page. I think this is going to be Kimi's first race at Monaco.
No, didn't he do it last year? They did last year, right? They did Monaco last year.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You're
right. Yeah, so we'll see. Kimi's either going to be second or third. I think Russell's going to be very motivated.
Yes, well, of course, that goes without saying. That yes, he's going to want to put a stamp on it, right? Because now that you say that, I think if Kimi comes out triumphant on this one, it's going to really.
It's a wrap.
No, I'm not going to say a wrap, but it's going to be more of a mental burden for Russell.
Right? It's a wrap.
No,
he's not going to come back from it.
It's not a wrap until we further in the season, but
it's going to be a mental.
You think so, huh?
He's gonna bite Russell's ear. He's gonna bite Kimi's ear like Tyson did to old boy. Yeah, but anyway,
I think George is coming back with a vengeance this time around, right? So, and I'm not sure if the McLaren boys have enough. Well, yeah, the track might be the equalizer. I'm just thinking about the track might be the equalizer in this one. That if you can keep it off those barriers and be quick, the McLaren, I'm gonna revise what I said. I think it's gonna be a Piastri 1, George 2, and a Lando 3. That's my prediction. That's my because
so he's not even in the top 3.
Yeah, well, I just realized the track is the big constraint right now. So is how well as a driver you could stitch together that one lap to put it there, because there, and as long as your pit crew is doing what they need to do under a kerfuffle, you'll keep your position, right? So yeah, I think that's gonna be, I think that's gonna be it. I think so.
I think you're right. And I think if Lewis has taught us anything this weekend, he knows Monaco pretty well. If he keeps his car the way he likes to keep it, he might put up some good qualifying times.
Well,
just like he did this weekend.
Well, I hope Ferrari doesn't fix it for him that he can't do that. That's my concern. I don't have a concern in Lewis. I'm just concerned in how his team interprets the data and the adjustments they make based on the data. that they see from the car, right?
Yeah.
So, that being said, we'd like you to join us again in 2 weeks after the Monaco Grand Prix to hear what we have to say about it. Have a good week, all.
Take it easy.